Hey guys, we're going to have a look at recovery strategies today. Alright, so first up, there's different types of recovery. You can have an active recovery, passive recovery, you can look at lowering your body temperature, a replenishment of fuel stores, and rehydration. So first up, we're looking at active recovery. An active recovery is when you're actually moving about as you recover. And generally, it stands to be about 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Other places I've seen should be about 40% of the intensity that you were working at. So the benefits of this is that as you're moving around, you're keeping your blood flow moving. And that means that there's higher levels of oxygen than if you were just resting, and that improves the removal of lactic acid. It also creates a muscle pump, and that improves oxygen supply to the muscles and also improves waste removal. It prevents venous pooling. So venous pooling is when the blood pools in the veins, and you don't want that because if the blood's all in the veins, it's not elsewhere, in particular your brain, so you don't want to pass out. So you want to keep that blood moving. You don't want it to stay stagnant in areas that are lower in your body, say your feet and your legs. And also hydrogen ions are generally removed in half the time if you participate in an active recovery as opposed to just resting. A passive recovery is just a state of complete rest. Now normally athletes, when they compete, their passive recovery will generally be just sleeping, and that's usually adequate. If someone was to be doing sprinting sessions, perhaps their passive recovery would be sitting down on a bench somewhere. And the benefits of that are that PC or phosphocreatine stores can't actually recover unless you're resting. And so to get to that full state of recovery with your CP stores, you need about 10 minutes of full rest. And also there's an element of psychological recovery as well, because you've had a break from the activity that you've been doing. Alright, so lowering body temperature, that's really important. Say if you've done a marathon, triathlon, a heavy training session, or if you've played a heavy game in the heat, often your body can overheat, as we looked at in the previous video. And there's some different ways that you can lower your body temperature. Just oral hydration, so just drinking water, intravenous hydration, which I don't know if they've actually proved to be any more effective, and that means that the liquid's going through a drip. There's cool or cold showers, so rinsing off under cold water. That generally allows the blood at the skin surface to cool down and then take that coldness back to the muscles. Cool rooms, often players will sit in a cool room, particularly in periods of rest. And also there's an option of wearing ice vests. Now, it really depends on the type of sport that's being played. Usually it's team sports where ice vests are used. And ice vests are vests filled with a particular gel that cool down, a bit like your ice packs in your lunchbox. And the players will wear them to cool their body temperature down, because the situation that would be applicable to this is when there'd be an external high temperature, say players competing in 30 degrees plus temperatures. Okay, replenishment of fuel stores is essential. No athlete can go on without doing something like this. It will depend on the activity. If they're doing a high intensity activity, they're looking at replenishing phosphocreatine stores, and that's a passive recovery that's required. To assist this, though, some athletes, particularly bodybuilders, will use creatine supplements, and that just sort of gives a little boost to creatine that's able to be replenished. Protein, we're jumping glycogen, we'll go on to that to the next slide, but protein in the meantime, that also needs to be replaced, particularly if there's heavy intensity, so lifting weights or using your body mass as a force. So you need protein to provide basic building blocks for muscle repair. As you do activity, there's micro tears that occur in the muscle, and they need to be repaired with protein. Protein also helps boost insulin levels, and that actually aids in protein synthesis. And that reduces the protein breakdown. So not only are you building up protein, but you're preventing it from breaking down also, and insulin aids in this. And just a guideline, protein for recovery should be ingested or eaten in the first 3 hours after intense exercise if it's going to be effective. They've found that if protein is eaten after those 3 hours, it just doesn't really work as well to replace those stores and help repair the micro tears in the muscle. And there's definitely benefits when carbohydrates are eaten in conjunction with proteins. There seems to be a better absorption rate, but the ratio that's recommended is 4:1. So 4 serves of carbs with 1 serve of protein in a post-workout meal, and that's within the first 2-3 hours. Alright, so glycogen is probably one of the most important fuel stores that long-distance athletes will want to replenish, particularly immediately after the event. There's a 2-hour window that scientists have looked at, and they've said that that's when carbohydrate absorption is at its highest. And in particular, foods with a high glycemic index, such as fruit juice, glucose lollies, honey, jam, anything that raises the blood sugar quickly will be the things that an athlete wants to consume. Sports drinks are a fantastic example of this also. When, again, like I said before, when the carbohydrates are consumed with protein, there seems to be a better insulin response, and therefore the glucose going to the muscles seems to be enhanced as well. So you'll find that sometimes the athletes, or most of the time the athletes won't just consume glucose by itself. They'll have some sort of protein to help boost those insulin levels and the glucose absorption. The AIS actually recommends 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrate for every kilogram of body mass immediately after exercise. If you have a look at the graph there on the screen, you've got a high carbohydrate diet compared to a low carbohydrate diet. And there's 3 different training bouts, so 3 training sessions of 2 hours each. And what happened there was the person represented by the red line had a high carb diet, and each time their carbohydrate stores were replenished almost back to the original point, not quite as much, but almost back. Now, the person with the low carb diet didn't really replenish their stores very well at all. By the time they got to the 3rd training bout, in that 48-hour time frame, they didn't have a lot of carbs at all, and as a result they would have suffered. They wouldn't have been able to train properly. So it is essential that an athlete restores their carbs. They don't just appear magically, they have to be refueled via those high glycemic index foods, and then later on carb loading on the low glycemic index foods. Alright, rehydration is essential for athletes. So there's a basic issue with sweat in that you lose water, but you also lose a range of electrolytes such as sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, bicarbonate, phosphate, and sulfate. So it's a big range of things that you lose. It's not just salt. And the thing is that if you just use water to rehydrate, you're not really replacing those minerals. So the other problem with water is that it can actually cause bloating and suppress thirst, and it's not absorbed very quickly into the bloodstream. But say you've done an activity for maybe about an hour, water will suffice, it will be fine. But obviously if you've got elite athletes competing against each other, you want to have the edge, you want to have the physiological edge, and so obviously you're not going to just stick with water. Sometimes you'll see that in tennis matches, right before the game, you'll have the tennis players going through their pre-routine, and they'll have a water bottle and they'll have a sports drink bottle, usually their own formula made up. And what they do is they have a sip from each. And so they're sort of balancing out the water with the sports drink. Now, sports drinks actually speed up the process of hydration. They work better than water at being absorbed into the bloodstream, but it really only works if the carb content is 8 grams or less per every 100 mils. If it's more than that, it makes the drink too sugary or too glucosey, and it just simply doesn't absorb as well. So you get 3 different types of sports drinks. There's hypotonic sports drinks, and they're to replace the lost fluids, and they've got a low osmolality. So that means they've got a low concentration of particles. So not much glucose, not many electrolytes at all, mainly water. Then you've got isotonic sports drinks, and they've got a moderate osmolality. That means they've got sort of a balance of those electrolytes, sugars, and water. And that's to actually replace the lost fluids and also the lost electrolytes. And the isotonic sports drinks are the ones that most athletes will go for. Then you've got a hypertonic sports drink, and that means it's got a high osmolality. It's got a high concentration of the sugars and the salts, or the electrolytes, and that's basically to replace glycogen and supplement the diet rather than actually provide rehydration. So depending on the type of issue that you've got, whether you're just dehydrated with water or you've actually lost a lot of sugar and salts as well, will depend on the sort of sports drink that you need. In most cases though, an isotonic sports drink will be the one that athletes will turn to. Alright, so just in summary, when it comes to recovery, there's a choice of active or passive, and that depends on the intensity of the exercise or the sport that the athlete is doing, and also the duration. If it's really short, intense, then generally a passive recovery is required. If it's a long endurance sport, then usually an active recovery is required, followed by passive afterwards. Generally, a replenishment of fuels and rehydration are necessary. In fact, I shouldn't say generally, it's an absolute must. No athlete would be able to recover properly over a series of weeks if they didn't actually restock on their fuels and rehydrate adequately. And also lowering body temperature, that's essential only really if it was over a particular limit in the first place, if they had actually overheated. So obviously an athlete that was working in cool conditions, say 16 degrees outside, probably really wouldn't need to lower their body temperature any further. It's really only when athletes are working in hot and humid conditions. All right, thanks for watching.